Green dragons might just be the hardest dragon to run. If they're run right, then they should never be seen at your table. Like, at all. But even then, their claws should be felt at your players every turn. Welcome to the channel. My name's Timothy, though some people do call me Tim. I've been DMing for almost 30 years and running 7 weekly games of D&D for the last 4. Today's deep dive into personality traits, lairs, battle tactics, and synergistic allies will give you everything that you need to run a green dragon that drops your player to their knees and wraps their characters in unseen chains. And if need be, help you to punish them if they manage to corner it. Because there is nothing that a green dragon enjoys more than bringing somebody under their control. Ego and ambition are the 2 big drivers of a green dragon. They see almost everyone as beneath them and get bored easily of the status quo. Their ego is so large that they'll take ambitious risks, like employing powerful adventurers or pitting rival nations against one another, all for their profit and amusement. They won't be careless about it though. Working through existing minions to get more minions is essentially their MO. As they age, a green dragon's ambition stretches further and further from home. Their self-importance and their desire to gain influence to match growing at a steady rate to where they're never satisfied. Wormlings will condescend to serve as pawns for older dragons, and they won't leave until they've got some influence and power of their own, which naturally means that Mommy Dearest will be doing all she can to avoid letting them get that power and influence. That might actually be an appropriately exploitable chink in the adult green dragon's armor for your players to exploit, trying to turn one of the children against Mommy Dear. Except, of course, that Mom was once a little one to her mom, and so she's expecting betrayal. It's a little bit of a catch-22. Regardless, this is permission to use a clutch of conniving wormlings as the lieutenants for an older green dragon, but not permission to use young ones. By the time a green dragon is young, if they're worth anything at all, and they certainly think they are, they have flown the coop and have set up influence of their own, and they avoid older dragons who might foil their plots. Lesser creatures are able to be involved, which is to say, everyone that's not a dragon, and everyone who's not them. But only subjugated creatures that the green dragon has appropriate dirt on are truly safe to involve in the nitty-gritty details of their plots. Unlike other dragons who rely on the fear of personal harm to keep their minions in line, a greens won't be as easy to turn against them. They might seem oddly loyal, and that's because they'll stand to lose something more than just their life when the dragon is in their immediate presence, because these dragons love blackmail, extortion, and manipulation. But if you can find the blackmail material, move their loved ones to safety, or otherwise unravel the dragon's web of deceit, their minions' loyalty will disappear faster than a cat on bath day. Ooh, she gave me a look on that one. Speaking of blackmail, this is the most precious treasure in a green's possession. They bore quickly of meaningless fortunes, according to the monster manual, which immediately singles them out as not being player characters. Instead, their most highly prized possessions will be either baubles that represent their deceptions or tools that aid them in the extortion itself. Think the bloodied blade of murderers, evidence of infidelity, or a noble's bank records. Any noble. They're probably all in the hole on their taxes somewhere. Second to that will be magical means of surveillance or control, like crystal balls, the rod of rulership, the staff or eyes of charming, or a potion of clairvoyance, and so on. Anyway, as greens age, their ambition continues to grow. Adults pride themselves on influencing the communities that are near to their lair, and they're obsessed with information. Ancients, on the other hand, are rarely seen even by their servants, and they start playing the different factions of different empires against one another for their own fun and profit, probably out of boredom. All of this means that your first encounter with a green dragon should not involve the dragon at all. They'll encounter servants. They'll be reported on. Then, the green will manipulate them into its web with what it's learned. Adventurers are powerful tools and rare commodities. Switching your mindset to think of them in that fashion helps you to get inside the mind of this green. So if a group passes through a green's territory, it will try to use them. The arrogance of that is one of its few weaknesses. The most likely form of use for a group of adventurers is to hire them to do something against one of the dragon's other enemies, especially if the dragon is young enough that these adventurers pose a real threat to its life. Some of those jobs might even be genuine. Meanwhile, others are going to be designed to get the adventurers to stick their hand in the cookie jar so that the dragon can gain blackmail material against them. And often, both will be true.
Both is good.
Because greens are the most patient and conniving of dragons. They're willing and even eager to play the long game. So hiring the group for a series of heists and killing missions only to hold the proof of their crimes against them at a later date is very on brand. And honestly, that's how I'd generally suggest including them as a villain in your campaign, all while avoiding even hinting at the dragon's existence, until the party hears it as the final words of the innocent man that they thought was the villain, right before his mind exploded. See the spellcasting section for details on that. And even if this false villain survives long enough to tell them, he might not even be able to direct them towards the dragon's lair. Because green dragons' forest lairs are all about seclusion and avoidance. They'd rather avoid almost any fight.
Oh, okay.
I mean, while a red dragon will defend its horde under almost any circumstance, a shrewd green will instead say something along the lines of, "Oh well, another lair lost. I suppose I'd better go find your birthplace, enslave the people, and trap your families in glass jars, and threaten them with torturous deaths until you have repaid me everything that I've lost, with interest. And by then, I'll probably have grown so used to your servitude and so fond of them that we'll just continue on." So, there's that. But ultimately, in a green size, combat, that's servant's work. And if you manage to force a green dragon into doing so, he or she will already feel like they've failed. And they won't be happy about it. But forcing them into it will be no mean feat, because they'll keep careful watch on their lairs. Adult and ancient dragons have an unmatched surveillance system that we'll talk about a little bit further in their regional effects, while for younger dragons, loyal minions on watch will be needed. But regardless of who's doing the watching, green dragons set themselves up for success by hiding their lairs in out-of-the-way places amid natural camouflage. Interwoven branches, trees planted close together, long thorn brambles, hollow trunk passageways, caverns under roots, or caves hidden behind waterfalls are all classic examples, especially if they're already remotely located and near to a secluded lake or two. Because like black dragons, green dragons are amphibious and have a swim speed. Unlike black dragons, they're less inclined to repeatedly ambush their prey, and more likely to seek to avoid them or escape them. If backed into a corner, they can and will use the advantages of underwater combat against those who aren't prepared. But generally, instead of interconnected pools that they can swoop from one to another within their lair, the water in their lair should lead to escape hatches that get them away from their lair, or allow them to slip around behind intruders towards the actual exit. This is also why greens prefer high ceilings and perhaps the option for an aerial exit, especially adults and ancient green dragons who have unmatched ranged firepower for a dragon. It's worth noting that greens are the only dragon with a condition immunity, even if it's only poisoned. And so they'll actively seek effects that will blanket this weakness upon intruders to give them the advantage. This can take many forms. A poisonous gas deposit that's purposefully tapped, yellow mold that's been carefully cultivated, or just overrunning the place with poison ivy to give everybody the itchies. And though green dragons prefer natural surroundings versus constructed, that doesn't mean that they're above putting in a few cleverly created mechanical traps too, especially ones lined with various poisons that will slow people down and make them weaker should they manage to catch up. And in fact, adult and older greens will favor traps that can be triggered remotely from a distance, instead of requiring adventurers to fail on a perception check to avoid a tripwire or stepping on a pressure plate. And that's because of their regional effects, specifically Beast Spies, which is possibly the best regional effect of all dragonkind. It gives all tiny beasts the ability to understand Draconic and to contact the dragon telepathically. Hundreds, likely thousands of tiny little spies all over their domain ready to report. It's worth noting that not all animals are beasts, so things like flying snakes and sturges that seem really cool don't actually fall into this category. Also, worth noting that swarms are made up of a bunch of tiny little things even though they're medium or larger sized, so they definitely qualify. These beasts are able to talk to the dragon and then receive communication back, but the dragon can't initiate the conversation. That's maybe its only weakness. Regardless, the shenanigans that can be performed with just tiny beasts and traps laid about the woods might be enough to drive off some of your adventurers before they even finish that 1 mile slog to the lair. Rats chewing through the trigger rope on a log trap springs to mind, though a cat pushing a weight off of a ledge in order to trigger the beginnings of some kind of Rube Goldberg machine of death feels pretty on brand too. Tiny animals in and around the lair will give constant, real-time information to the dragon about where the party is and what they're doing, unless you hunt down every living creature. And even that will tell the dragon where you just were. This is one reason that traps that can be triggered remotely are a green dragon's friend. The other reason we'll talk about in the spellcasting section. Their other ability, Poisonous Thicket, is based on long rests. A failed saving throw gives the poison condition for the first hour after your long nap. It is friendly, not affecting the dragon's minions, and it means that like several other kinds of dragons, green dragons are big fans of the morning ambush. Unlike those other dragons, the green dragons know exactly where you were resting, what precautions you took, and how you set up your camp, because the spiders, squirrels, and owls have all been watching. I hope no one got frisky, because the green will even factor your romantic relationship into their tactics. Speaking of, let's see what the new stat block says about green dragons' tactics. On the lower side of the CR for chromatic dragons, these guys are less physically capable than many of their cousins, but they're smarter than all of them. So pull out all the stops of planning your tactics carefully, and don't be afraid to use every dirty trick available. All chromatic dragons get expertise in perception and training in stealth, right from wormling up to ancient. But greens get more. Young greens learn the art of deception, making them the only chromatic dragon with any change on their stat block from wormling to young, with the exception, of course, of individual numbers. And older and above dragons add persuasion to the mix. This, more than anything on their stat block, emphasizes the difference in how a green dragon is expected to influence the world and interact with the player characters. When the chips are down and it can't avoid them any longer, it will try to talk its way out of trouble with carefully crafted lies and assurances. And they'll happily sacrifice their pawns to sell this lie, or just to survive. Their poisonous breath weapon targets constitution, allowing to avoid things like evasion. And it means that the saving throws against them tend to be decent, but are kinda average and rarely top-notch, unlike targeting dexterity, which targets the main stat for several classes. The fact that it deals poison damage is fine at lower levels, but becomes sort of an Achilles heel at the high levels, though it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. Hero's Feast is still the #1 spell for green dragon hunting. But while previously it used to give immunity to poison damage, now it only grants resistance, which is a big step in the dragon's favor. Still, resistance is pretty good, and it definitely factors into the multi-attack versus breath debate. For a Wyrmling, its breath weapon is comparable on a single target that's likely to fail its constitution save, and a no-brainer for 2+ targets. Young dragons are almost always better off rending a single opponent, but 2+ is fine. Adults and Ancients continue the young dragon's trend, but it's a closer call. 2 targets or more is a good idea and generally pretty easy to get in a 60 or 90 foot cone, unless the group has poison resistance. In that case, double all of those numbers. And so in both cases, you should test for poison resistance first, either with Detect Magic, which is coming up now along with their other spells, or with a legendary action that we'll talk about later. Green dragons are canonically some of the best spellcasters, which makes their limited spell selection a little bit weird. At adult, they only get 2 at-will spells. The most notable is Mind Spike, which they get to mix into their multi-attack. But is it worth it? It is for ancient dragons, with 27 damage equaling the average of their typical rend. Use it on high AC targets whose wisdom saving throws are probably poor. At adults, it's more of a question. As a 3rd level spell, it averages 18 damage versus the 22 from the rend. But part of the rend attack is poison damage, so if you're facing a poison resistant opponent, then Mind Spike equals out. Jeremy over at Insight Check pointed out that a Mind Spike can also overcome a rogue's ability to hide or a spellcaster's invisibility, which is true, but that does only matter if the target is outside of the green dragon's blind sight range, which already negates both of those options. But that ability to know where your target is through Mind Spike is useful if you're playing cat and mouse games, which a green dragon totally will. Because for the next hour, if you're concentrating, it lets you know their exact location at all times. It's perfect for tracking a group's progress through the lair. And it's a detail that's easy for your players to forget. But if your dragon can trigger traps from elsewhere in their lair, it could get ugly. Their other at-will is Detect Magic, which they should always be concentrating on unless they're using Mind Spike. They'll use this to identify buffs and valuable or powerful magic items. It will also tell them if any of their minions have had their Geas broken, in case the players get it in their head to turn a minion against it. Because indeed, adult and ancient dragons can cast Geas once a day. If you've been pronouncing this Geas for ages, don't worry, me too. No one cares. Well, some people do, but it doesn't actually matter that much. Anyway, Geas is a neat spell with some issues. It lets you charm people long term for 30 days per casting. It also allows you to give an instruction kind of like the suggestion spell, and if the target follows their instructions, all is well, and if they ever disobey, boom, 5d10 psychic damage. The issues are that it only deals that damage once per day, and it takes a minute to cast the spell. With that in mind, a green dragon is most likely to use this spell on weak minions that are in powerful positions of authority. Members of the nobility or the city watch, tavern keepers, or local merchants all spring to mind. Basically anybody whose position is more powerful and influential than, say, their combat ability is. Ideally, we're talking humanoids with less than 27 hit points. Ones who will die instantly if they betray the green. Otherwise, it's leaning into the charm effect and will use this ability on those creatures that it allows close to its lair. This is less about the damage and more about stopping these stronger opponents from being able to physically turn against them, which is the same reason why a dragon like this might use Geas on a captured adventurer. It's about neutralizing that threat so that they can be manipulated by other means, since the damage isn't going to do it. This probably won't last long at levels 5+, given how Dispel Magic works, but it could make for an awesome story seed where a dragon has adventurers captured at low levels and uses a Geas to force their compliance. See, I did it. Geas, not Geas. Finally, ancient greens get an ability that allows them to slip back into the recesses of their victim's mind, modify memory. It essentially allows them to rewrite a 10-minute span of memory in the last 24 hours. This lets the ancient dragon remove itself from the memory of pretty much everybody. Subtle use can also push people into different behavior, seeking revenge for a remembered betrayal, etc. In combat, this spell struggles to land if it's not the instigating event. But if it does, it charms and incapacitates until somebody casts a spell on it or it takes damage. And if you can finish your description for the modified memory fast enough, even if the spell is broken, the modified memory will take root. A green will definitely take advantage of that. Anything that can be said in just a couple of seconds is probably good. I'm an illusion cast by a wizard you saw escaping the way you just came in. You spotted a pit trap spanning the distance between us. I used my breath weapon to intimidate you moments ago. There's no need to worry about spreading out. You get the idea. And you can still leave them charmed and incapacitated until the minute is over or somebody spends action economy to wake them up. Legendary actions are where green dragons regain some credibility as dragonkind's top spellcasters, because they're the only chromatic dragon that can cast a spell with every legendary action. Naturally, they do have a melee option, and it's the good one. Pounce lets them move half their speed and make a rend attack. Because green dragons don't really want to be fighting, they might be using this more for the movement than for the attack portion, so if the attack isn't going to win the fight or at least significantly tilt it, consider whether or not you could instead reduce incoming damage against the dragon or prepare yourself for the opportunity to escape. Their noxious miasma at a glance looks awesome, but it has a weird downside. Covering a good area at adult and an even better one at ancient, it's another good way to force characters to spread out. It does mediocre damage, but the dragon is immune to it. Or is it? Because immunity to the damage of an ability does not confer immunity to its other effects. And the miasma gives a -2 to armor class, which is kind of not cool to do to yourself. Though, of course, it's absolutely amazing against your enemies. That said, greens, more than any other dragon, absolutely have both the temperament and ability to ruin their opponents without ever getting physically close themselves. And that's because of their third legendary action, Mind Invasion. Yes, it's just a fancy name for getting to cast Mind Spike again. But unlike all the other chromatics who can trade a legendary action to cast one of their at-will spells, the green dragon does not have the restriction of only being able to do so once per round. They can swoop around blasting mines and dropping miasma clouds and breathing their breath weapon and never get close to the dirt, which gives them the highest consistent ranged firepower of all chromatics. They might actually benefit from taking the dodge action on their turn if their breath hasn't recovered yet, because one more Mind Spike is probably not going to turn the tide, but disadvantage on every ranged spell and weapon attack just might, especially if the characters are still down there dealing with minions. As we've talked about throughout, green dragons gather minions like my cats gather cat toys at every opportunity, even if they have to hide the cat toy from me so they'll buy a new one. A lot of their influence and power comes from gathering humanoid minions, a surprising number of which will be no significant physical threat. But that doesn't mean that they don't invest in getting some controllable minions that can be used a little more aggressively. The monster manual suggests that young dragons ally with kobolds, ettercaps, thieves, and other cowardly creatures. And ettercap are pretty decent, providing the poison condition or restraining and moving opponents away from the action are both very valuable abilities, ones that can both protect the green's health and allow its escape. But there are a lot of other good options too. Ultimately, poison immunity, poison use, things that grapple or restrain, or spells that limit information are the top-end synergies for Green Dragon. They all serve the purpose of helping the dragon stay alive and, if need be, to escape. Mezoloth are my favorite example. Immune to poison and poisoned, mercenary enough to serve for pointless treasure, with Cloud Kill and Darkness both paired with Blindsight, and the ability to restrain up close and teleport with their target, they're almost perfect. Green dragons also give the opportunity to twist the traditionally good and neutral aligned creatures of the forest, and use them against the party. Pixies, dryads, treants, and sprites aren't above being blackmailed and forced into service. And druids and green hags are very sensible and classic minions also. Both have additional spells that come in handy as additional magic for the dragon to pull upon in order to gather or share all of the important information they need to. and Green Hag's mimicry and disguise abilities can help to send the party down the completely wrong path. Has this been helpful? Would it be more helpful to you if you had a written printout that you could just slip into your monster manual to give you a written tactics guide right there on the page? If so, sign up for my newsletter where I'll be sharing those for the monsters that I break down. Otherwise, enjoy my cat's antics, and I'll see you in the next video.